Let me ask you a question. Do you think LeBron James, Steph Curry, or Kevin Durant will get any better in 2025-2026 season? Now, will they play well? I think that's pretty safe to say because all of them have been pretty efficient and been pretty productive since they came into this league. But will it be any better? I don't know. As you know, ESPN came out this week with their top 100 players going into the 2025-2026 season, which is coming up soon, very soon. We're less than a month away. We saw Media Day this week. We saw Ozempic Zion again, and we're wondering if that will be a mainstay or if it'll revert back to what we've seen these last couple of seasons. But that's besides the point. But the point here is the top 10 is often pretty contentious because somebody you think should be in there is going to be left out. And guys that may not particularly fit that mold or have potential to have a huge fall off or are coming in from a season that wasn't quite as spectacular as ESPN can make it sound, we often have our own opinions and thoughts when it comes to these rankings. We did it with the Bleacher Report top 100 all time. We've done it with many, many other rankings that come out during the summer months where the news cycle is pretty small. But here's another one. As you look at the top 10 ESPN ranking, you see three names that have been there for quite a while and seem to not want to go away. And that's LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. Now, in terms of their resumes, absolutely they belong in the top 10. Those guys are some of the top players we've seen for years and years. These are MVPs. These are champions. These are all-stars. But if it's time for the new guard to take over, why do they keep pushing these older players down our throats? As some of the young guys say, the old heads seem to want to stay in the past and not let it go. Does it not seem the same here in ESPN's top 10 ranking? So let's talk about this. But first, if you enjoy NBA breakdowns and analysis, please subscribe to the channel. We are working for that 2,000 sub mark and can't do it without you guys. Also, check out the GOATcast podcast, streaming live every week with guests and some wild takes. Thank you, and now let's get into this. So there's one thing I don't like. It's when we have to put a caveat or add something to a player to talk about what they've done currently. And we do it way too often with LeBron James. I know you guys, some of you guys love him. Some of you guys are not a big fan of his. But here's what you can't do. You can't say at age 40. Because if you're playing starter minutes, if you have a role on the court, you need to produce like you're a starter and somebody trying to fit a role. So we can't put the caveat at 40, LeBron's doing this. Because if he's going to play the minutes he plays, he better be doing that. And in some cases, even more. Because if the team is going to put you in a position to be the man, you got to be the man. So we can't say, oh, you did well for a 40-year-old. No, we're going to say you did well for a top 5 small forward or a top 5 in this situation power forward. And I mean, looking at his numbers, he did well last season. His raw numbers say, hey, LeBron was not bad at all. But we look at the playoffs where a number 3 seed gets a gentleman's sweep from a team that nobody really gave a chance to beat them. But they did, and they did it in emphatic fashion. They pretty much rolled over the Lakers last year with a top 10 player in LeBron James. But you'll say, oh, but he's 40. You have to temper your expectation. So if he's 40, then shouldn't he not be judged by that when you're doing the top 10? Are you saying that last year, going into this season, he played or is expected to play as a top 10 player? That's where I get a little lost with these lists, because there's really no formula on how it's done. Because if we're just going raw numbers and what he did, then in a few minutes, I'll tell you why some other players should have been in this conversation. Or if they're going by what they could potentially do this season, then there's no way you keep LeBron James in the top 10 in year 23. But I know there'll be those detractors that say I'm crazy and that what he's doing is monumental and all these other things. Okay, maybe to you. Not saying he's doing anything bad. He was All-NBA second team, which could be debatable, but I don't have a huge problem with it. He did have a negative plus minus, but some people don't take that into account. It's an advanced stat, so some people don't feel like advanced stats really tell the truth, so they don't really put much emphasis in that, and that's fine. But LeBron James having to have some of his explanation of his season being followed by at age 40 shouldn't boost him in these conversations. That should be impressive for, I guess, the accolade part of that. But as far as being impressive, as far as the current landscape of the NBA, no. LeBron James at number 8, you know why they did it. And then you have number 9 being Kevin Durant, a guy that didn't even sniff the playoffs last year. He was a top 6 scorer in the league. At his age, that's phenomenal. Yes, it is. But did he make his team better? Did his team flourish because of what he was doing on the court? Well, I just said they didn't even make the playoffs. In a Western Conference where it was very doable because there was a lot of movement between some pretty good teams where the movement could have had different teams struggling at times because they were implementing new big players. And there was even teams that we don't know what they were doing as far as the Sacramento Kings when they pretty much brought over the Chicago Bulls players to be the Sacramento Kings when those players over in Chicago weren't winning. So why would you bring them over to Sacramento and think the outcome was going to be different? And then you had New Orleans in turmoil with Zion, and there's so many different things where there's no excuse for a team with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and even a pretty much disappointment in Bradley Beal, who's an overpaid role player. The fact that they couldn't even get into the play-in is pretty telling. So I'm sure people are projecting Kevin Durant to have a solid season. He's with a much better team or better constructed team in Houston. There's a lot of hype for this team and what he will bring to them. So they probably want to put him there to keep that hype going, because if he's number 15, then that doesn't bring much hype to that Houston Rockets team. So they're using this, I'm assuming, as a selling point to hype up this season. So it's strategic in the way they rank players, and I'm sure that's what this is. And then you have Steph Curry, who, no issues with Steph. No, he didn't have the season he's had in the past. Yes, he's getting older. Yes, he's still efficient, but is he the transcendent player he once was? That's up to you to say. I don't think so. We even saw him with a 2-point game. We saw him in games where he was not a factor at all. Golden State still won 48 games. They were in the playoffs. They beat that Houston Rocket team that Kevin Durant is hoping to bolster. They were able to beat that young team as an older team with a pretty much a big-time trade and bringing a big-time player in Jimmy Butler. So they were able to weather some storms and weather some tough times last season, some roster reconstruction when it came to Steve Kerr's lineups, some weird lineups, some weird, issues. But they were able to weather that. Steph Curry, as always, is the anchor of that team. He's the epicenter of that team. Does that make him a top 10 player currently in the NBA? Did what he did last year bolster that team into any type of contention, any type of anything that was going to be significant when we're talking about who's going to win the championship? No. I don't think anybody put Golden State in a place where they were going to be champions last year or even in the conversation. So having Steph at number 10, I'm kind of okay with Steph being in the top 10. because I think what he's doing is still very valuable to the NBA. I think if you put him on a different team, he would still be valuable. What he does wouldn't go away, and in some places he probably would be even more important and even more potent, because if he had certain type of players around him, it would magnify what he does. So I'm not too mad with that. But I'm just looking at some of the guys right outside. And when I asked, do you think that LeBron, KD, Steph are going to get any better? The obvious answer is no. They're not going to get better. They might find little wrinkles in their game where they can use it to exploit something and use it to stay relevant on the court as they become elder statesmen. But I don't think they're going to get any better. And one player that got into the top 5 for ESPN's ranks but didn't even play a full season, didn't even qualify for any awards, was Victor Wembanyama. But they see the potential in him. So that's where the rankings get a little bit weird, because if you're going to judge by potential, there are some guys that should move LeBron, KD, Steph out, because they have a very good chance of being top 10 caliber players this coming season, because we saw them make either leap or stay consistent in what they've been given throughout these years. Now, if you have an issue with Victor being number 5, the guy didn't even play a full 65 games. He was still leading in blocks when the dust settled and the regular season was over. So, yeah, he's that special that he can lead a stat in the league and take off more than 20 games and still have that leading stat when all is said and done. So, yeah, I don't mind him being 5th. And he was improving, even though the Spurs didn't make the playoffs. They were improving, and it was on his back. So I have no issues with that. But if you're going by potential and what they can do and what they should do going into the season, then you got to look a little bit harder at some of these guys. And you might want to let some of the old guard trail back. And 3 names come to mind for me. And the first one is Cade Cunningham. And I know some people will be like, well, it's way too early. We need to see what he can do. Now that he's kind of established himself, can he keep that momentum going? But what makes you think he can't? He finally got a team that he can kind of anchor. He showed he could do it well. He took a team that won 14 games in the 2023-2024 season to 44 wins, a playoff spot, and they had a tough tooth and nail back and forth rumble with the New York Knicks, who many believed would be in the finals or somewhere close, and they were in the conference finals this past season. So a team that was really good against a team that many people overlooked, Detroit, were in competition with a very good New York team, and that was off the strength of Cade Cunningham and his season. He was an all-star this season. His numbers jumped up. He went from, I believe, 22 points per game to 26. He averaged 9 assists. You know, if we're just looking at raw numbers from last season going into this season, there's no reason LeBron James or even Steph Curry is over Cade Cunningham. He beats them both in scoring. And then he's a guy that's, I believe, top 4 or 5 in assist, which was better than LeBron's case. So, and 6 rebounds is nothing to laugh at for a point guard. So the fact that I believe he was number 12, I believe, in the rankings. I mean, come on. He could have easily been a top 10 player going into this season. I mean, if it's based on potential, he's shown his potential. He showed you that he could take a team and elevate a team to a playoff spot. And then he showed that they can be competitive in the playoffs. So I don't see how some of those guys are in there other than nostalgia, which a lot of you guys feel is a negative thing. You don't put guys, or you don't rank guys, or you don't position guys by nostalgia. We had a big mess about that earlier this year. Nostalgia is the worst thing that happened to the NBA, according to some people. So why are we putting LeBron, KD, Steph in the top 10 for what they've done in the past, not what they necessarily did last season? So I think Cade Cunningham fits that. Another guy is Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell has gotten better for the most part every year. Yes, he's a scorer, combo guard, but he's been the anchor, as I like to say, to a very good Cleveland Cavaliers team. And they've been making progress these last couple of seasons. Now, you look at his scoring numbers this year, only 24 points per game, down from the previous season, but he played more games, and he helped the Cleveland Cavaliers to have the best record in the East. And many felt they rivaled the eventual champions, the OKC Thunder. And I remember how much hype that first game between those teams that were on huge winning streaks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers beat them. Yes, Donovan Mitchell has a solid roster around him. He's got a DPOY guy in Evan Mobley. He's got Jared Allen out there. He has Darius Garland, an all-star. But the fact that he's putting up numbers like he was, and he's being the leader for this team, a team that will likely once again be in the top at least 3 out east. And I don't think it's that hard to say that they should be the number 1 team. Yes, the Knicks will be a tough matchup for them, and they'll probably fight tooth and nail to get to that number 1 spot. But I think Cleveland, with their roster, should be in that spot. And then you look at his playoff number. The guy averaged nearly 30 points in the playoffs this season. Yes, they only got to the conference semis. They had a few injuries. They had some stuff going on. But the fact that he was able to put up numbers like that is really impressive compared to some of the guys that got in over him. So yeah, Donovan Mitchell, if we're going to do based on potential, Donovan Mitchell is probably not going to get any worse. I don't think he's peaked as a player. He's not even 30 years old yet. So he's should be entering into his prime, not peaking or on the downslide of his career. So he should only get better in these next coming years. So based on his production and based on the fact that they're winning, because I think that should play into who are the best players. If they're playing on a team that they're helping win games, that should have put him at least close into a top 10 slot, where I believe he was 13th on ESPN's list. But he could have easily bumped out either KD or even Steph. And if you're asking me, but y'all will say I'm a LeBron hater, I wouldn't mind if he bumped LeBron James out of the top 10. But that's just me. But yes, he's another one that I think deserves to have had his name in that top 10 for the ESPN 2025-2026 rankings. Now, the last person I say is probably going to be met with a lot of pushback, mostly because they are very, very injury prone. Now, this person was in MVP talks early last season, and then he was ultimately involved in probably the biggest trade in NBA history, Anthony Davis. I know eyes are going up and people are probably going to click off now once I said that. But yes, I think Anthony Davis deserves a spot in the top 10. Maybe not solely based on last season. Yes, he got hurt right after the trade and didn't really get his groove with the Dallas Mavericks yet. But I think he's on the perfect team to utilize what he can do. Now that he has solid centers so that he can play his true position in the power forward, I think that's going to be the creation of a top 10 player once again in the NBA. I think if we're looking at potential, yes, AD's older. I don't think he's in his prime, but he's still very capable of putting up prime numbers for his position and for his game. I think he's on a team where now there are nights where he can be the number one option at times, and then he can kind of fall back and be a complimentary player for a Cooper Flag, or once he finally comes back, Kyrie Irving. But now he doesn't have to compliment a guy like LeBron James, who he did very well with, but there'll be nights where I think he'll be a little more free to play his game than he could with the Lakers team, because they had to have him play the center role, which he can do, and he showed that he could do it with the Lakers, but it's not his natural position, and it's not where I feel he feels the most comfortable, because here he can play I believe he can play more off ball and better off ball, and that he can be in the dunker spot much more than when he has to be battling Jokic's and guys like that, and Embiid's and guys like that. I mean, yeah, he's going to have to deal with Giannis a little more now, but I think he's up to that challenge. I think he can do that, and I think he will do that. So yes, I think AD will be a top 10, or should be a top 10 player based on what he can do next season. Now, are these seasonal rankings, like as far as what the potential or what these players will do this season? If that's the case, I think those three can easily replace the old guard in there, because I don't think the old guard is going to do anything drastically different this season than they did last season. But I've rambled on for long enough. What you guys think? Do you think that ESPN got it right with their top 10? Or are there some guys you think should be moved down some and other guys moved up? Or do you think you could shuffle the top 10 around with who they have in the top 10? And if you don't know who's in the top 10, go check it out on ESPN. They've got it there on the front page. You can check out who the top 100 are. Not going to do it here because we're just focusing on these players. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. YouTube's doing something crazy right now, so views are down big time. People are not being notified when new videos come out. It's just a crazy time. But if you guys like what you hear, please like and subscribe. Help me continue to get into the algorithm again and really be able to flourish a little bit more on YouTube if you like. If not, that's fine. I just appreciate you guys listening. Thank you again, and be back soon with more content.